If there's one pervading sentiment among the original Dragon Quest trilogy, it's that this is kind of the bottom of the barrel. Now, depending on who you ask, you'll get a more mellow or a more harsh take, but the fact remains, when on the topic of black sheep of the series, Dragon Quest II is in the eye of many. I'm not clear on the time frame for these numbers, but the first Dragon Quest eventually sold 2 million units, 1.5 million in Japan, and a more modest 500,000 units in the States. According to a 1987 interview with Yuji Horii, only 7 months after Dragon Quest launch, planning for the sequel began. That interview also revealed that programming was mostly completed by November of '86. Just a refresher, the first game released in '86 as well, in May. I'll let that math sink in for a second. Horii goes on to say that if they wanted to, Dragon Quest II could have been released that December. So why didn't they? Horii says that the simple answer is because the game's balance was all over the place. It was way too difficult. This game was too difficult? Me, man. According to another interview in 1989 with Koichi Nakamura, the staff was simply too busy to check the game as a whole. Nakamura continued, quote, "On the day the final version was ready to be taken in for production, I was shocked to learn that not a single person on the development team had played the game all the way through. I was horrified." I poke fun at this, but it makes sense honestly. Games had a much shorter turnaround back then, and this often led to corners being cut and aspects of the production not getting the attention they needed. Don't get me wrong though, it's not for lack of trying. The team used that extra month in December to balance the game as much as possible, and ultimately had to rush to meet Nintendo's cartridge production deadline. They submitted the final version before the new year, and the game was released to the Japanese public on January 26, 1987. Surprisingly, Japanese gamers were happy with Dragon Quest II. Many publications cited the difficulty, but simply remarked that it was part of the design. So who knows, maybe it won't be as bad as everyone says it is. Naive optimism is one of my best qualities. Regardless, let's get this one behind us. This is Dragon Quest II. "100 years have passed since the descendant of Erdrick defeated the Dragon Lord. In the intervening time, the bloodline of the hero continued to prosper, spawning heroes that grew to lead their own kingdoms." This is actually following up on a small tidbit of the original game's ending, where the king asked the hero if he wanted to rule Tantagel Castle, and the warrior declined, instead choosing to found his own kingdom instead. Now in the continent of Torland, we see one such king and his daughter the princess enjoying the peaceful courtyard in the kingdom of Moonbrooke. That peace is quickly interrupted as monsters infiltrate the castle.
"Majesty, the castle! It's being besieged by the forces of Hargon, the wizard!"
The king and his guard immediately go on the offense, driving back the invaders and protecting the princess. The minions of this Hargon begin flooding the king's courtyard, attempting to take he and the princess's lives. The king hides the princess away.
"Thy life is in danger, my daughter. Hide thyself now. Whatever happens to me, thou must be strong."
While he does put up one hell of a fight, the king is ultimately defeated by a swarm of Hargon's minions, along with most of the castle guard. The princess screams in horror as everything is taken from her in an instant. In the scuffle, one brave, nameless soldier survives the onslaught and travels all the way to the castle of Mildenhall to warn the late king's cousin. Hanging by a thread, this brave dude tells the king of Mildenhall of the tragedy that befell Moonbrooke, warning that Hargon is likely planning to destroy the remainder of the kingdoms across the land. After hearing this news, the king turns to his son who sits next to him.
"I am old, and this task must fall to younger hands. Thy destiny lies on that difficult road, just as it did for Erdrick the Great. For thou art of the line of Erdrick, and his doom is thine. Come with me now, if thou art ready."
The king tasks the prince with seeking out the other heirs of the Erdrick bloodline, the Prince of Cannock and the Princess of Moonbrooke. The king pushes the kid out the door pretty quick too. "Take your dinky sword, some money, don't call, we'll call you, bye." And just like that, the journey begins. I guess that's better than locking the hero in the starting room and making him use a limited resource to get out. The king of Tantagel was going through it at the time, so I give him a pass. But the Prince of Mildenhall makes his way to the kingdom of Cannock just up the street to recruit his cousin. The king of Cannock says that his kid went to the Cave of Bravery. Okay, but then you get to the Cave of Bravery and the old man hanging out inside says that he went back to Mildenhall to find me. Okay, I talked to the King of Mildenhall again, but damn it! The Prince of Cannock went back home already. His sister actually tells you how much he can't sit still if you go speak with her in Cannock, so this makes sense, but my god. Finally, the two princes bump into each other in the town of Leftwyn, with Prince Artho joining his cousin's quest. Later, they venture to the town of Hamlin, where things are not as they seem, as this person is quick to point out. But honestly, nothing seems to be that out of the ordinary. The only thing that's a little weird is the priest that's not set up in a church, but rather the end of a hallway leading out of the town? And this dog that, after you talk to it, gives you the old bow bow, bow wow. It'll then not leave your side while you're within Hamlin city limits. But the duo makes their way up to the wreckage of Moonbrooke Castle, seeing firsthand the devastation that Hargon's minions delivered. Within the ruins are the spirits of the ones killed during the attack, screaming for help but also offering helpful hints like the whereabouts of a special mirror. We even find the spirit of the late king, but something tells me he is unhappy.
Woe is me, for I am the unhappy king of Moonbrooke. To make matters worse, my daughter has been cursed and transformed into a common mutt.
Okay, I know exactly what common mutt he's talking about. And the last piece of this puzzle reveals itself in the secret passage the party has to trudge through poison to get to. A surviving Moonbrooke guard tells the party that the Mirror of Ra will reveal the princess's true self if she looks into it, breaking the curse. And it's true. After collecting the mirror and showing the clingy dog in Hamlin, Princess Varia of Moonbrooke is revealed. Now that the party is assembled, the real adventure can begin. The group travels north to the town of Leonport. After rescuing some girl from Hargon's minions, her grandfather rewards the party with a whole-ass boat, freeing them to travel the seas. The crew makes their way east along the coastline, eventually sailing all the way back to Tantagel Castle from the first game. This was a really cool surprise. You go inside and everything is just how you remember it. Even the old wizard in the corner who completely refills your mana every time you talk to him. It doesn't really matter since all the enemies around here are the same level from the beginning of that game, but the first two games really share some connective tissue. You can traverse the entirety of the previous game's map. The towns from the previous game are no longer around after 100 years apparently. Even the neighboring town, maybe they all mitosis into a super castle and Tantagel is all that there is now. I can only hope everyone else lived full lives. All except these guys. I hate these two. Since we have a ship though, we can simply sail across the canal and explore the Dragon Lord's castle. It's weird how Erdrick's sword is here again, in nearly the same exact place, mind you. Do the descendants of Erdrick return the equipment they find to the place where they found them after every generation? I tell you, libraries must love to see this family coming. But hey, that's not the only thing down here. The Dragon Lord? But I thought I beat you last time.
All that Harrigan threatens to take is really mine, for I am the grandson of the Dragon Lord. Once thou hast the 5 crests, seek out the good wizard Rubis.
And thus, the obligatory section of JRPGs where they become very open and you have to search the open world for MacGuffins begins. This time, it's the 5 crests. The story stops progressing here, and honestly doesn't go anywhere after this. You simply get more interactions with the NPCs and listen for their cryptic riddles and hints on where to go next. The NPCs function as they did previously. You have to listen to what they say, and now so more than ever. In the town of Zahan, a woman says that the dog over there has been pulling at her sleeve. I walk over and the dog drags me toward the tree line. I search around a little bit and find the golden key, a very important item. Cool. This type of thing does happen, and up to a certain point the hints are useful and do a great job of directing you, with clear directions like travel west from this town or giving hints on items or people of interest. Take the jailer's key. In this secluded town of Welgarth, the merchant has this blanked out space in his shop. I thought that this was just a bug or some problem with the emulation, and I wasn't willing to risk my save file, so I just ignored it. But then I chat with another citizen who asks if I've bought the secret jailer key from the merchant, and I immediately think, well, I didn't see any jailer key. Oh, okay, so I go back and I select the option and he sells me the item. It doesn't tell me what the item is, but I go in my inventory and I see that it's the jailer's key. Instances like this are in the game and I still love when they happen, but because of the game's increased size, everything is so much more spread out, creating a near limitless amount of applications for these hints to be used. And when you start collecting information on names and items that you've never heard of and won't for a long while, it can be a lot to keep track of. Organizing these terms and what setting they're applicable to and who said them and what the context is, it can be a lot. It's honestly too much this time. This cryptic shit is just... Oh, let's just do this now. In the first game, I had to look something up because I felt like it was just too obscure of a riddle for the average picnic. I wish that I didn't have to, but I also feel like it was pretty justified. I want to keep the outside help to a minimum as much as I can for this retrospective, but I ended up having to do it a lot here. I made it all the way to Lelandport, got the ship, then I sailed all around the world gathering lots of quest items by talking to NPCs and getting hints, but I hit a wall after I had unlocked every door, revisited every town with my new tools and information. I had gathered 3 of the 5 crests on my own using the info the game supplied me. But then I started hitting dead ends, and the NPCs were no longer giving me information I could use. So I looked it up, and I wasn't disappointed. Roge Fastfinger has been getting talked up in Welgarth, and this jailer says he's locked him up, with him somehow escaping. I thought this was just telling me that I have to find him somewhere in the world. But no, turns out if you walk to the right when standing on the middle tile in his room, you enter a small hidey hole, and Fastfinger is just here.
Me? Just hanging around.
How about the giant's flute? In the middle of bump nowhere, out in the sea, which is pretty big if you were unaware, there's a whirlpool-looking tile, a tile that I had actually interacted with beforehand, because the women in the town of Zahan tell that the men haven't returned from fishing, so I assume there's some shipwreck somewhere I have to investigate. But I can't do anything with this tile that I found, so I move on. Wrong! It turns out I just didn't try hard enough. I had to use that damn search command underneath the tile that would award me with the treasure that I can then trade for the giant's flute back in Lelandport. Of course! How could I be so stupid? And what kind of psychopath did they expect to find the dude's yarn? In one of the many towers throughout the game, I think there are like 4, this one has already been used to make significant progress, mind you. You have to walk up to the 3rd floor of a 7-floor tower, which the floors are all a bunch of fucking nothing, just to mention that. Literally every single one is a staircase leading up and a staircase leading down. But your intuition should tell you that on the 3rd floor, on one of the tiles in the top left of the room, you use the search command, that search command, and just find an extremely important quest item. For some reason, the searching in places that haven't been hinted at doesn't end there. I thought they had learned their lesson, but apparently not. How about the Suncrest? I want someone to show me what NPC told me I was supposed to walk outside of the boundaries of the teleporter room and search in the corner of a wide open space. At least in the last game, there was one section where the NPC was outside of the boundaries, so it piqued my curiosity. This game even does that later on in Tahoon for the Watergate. I intuited this on my own so easily, but this is nonsense.
Pardon me, good folk, but dost thou have the time?
What? No, I'm sorry. I don't.
Then may thy ears become cabbages and thy tongue a sausage.
I could continue, but I think you get the idea. The journey to Hargon is filled with these detours that sometimes make sense, but when they don't, it feels really unfair. I don't know how much of this we're allowed to blame on that rushed development cycle. I really want to give the team the benefit of the doubt here because, as I'll explain in a bit, the beginning of the game is so comfortable. But then, when the hunt for the crest begins, it feels awful. Literal pixel hunts where the entire world is on the table in front of you and you have to discern where to go. I did not want to have to rely on a walkthrough, but I simply had to in order to progress. And that's so backwards in a game with such a large focus on exploration. But after collecting all the crests and presenting Rubus with the Eye of Malroth, Erdrick's descendants are presented with the Wizard's Charm. They then take the fight to Hargon, revealing the entrance to the secret land of Roan, and press on to the castle. After entering the castle, we see that it looks exactly like Mildenhall Castle? You can even use the inn to rest if you need to, but after using the Charm of Rubus, the true castle is revealed. A hard battle is fought to get to Rubus. I'm sorry, hard? The climb up that tower is fucking impossible without the use of save states and hours of grinding. Yes, I know, we'll get there in a minute. Can we get through the story first? Yeah, okay, I guess so. Hargon is defeated, but in his dying breath, he warns of a sorcerer even greater than him, and says that he sends us to meet Malroth. Okay, I guess he didn't get the spell off in time. Oh well, the day is saved. Oh no. Malroth appears, presenting one final challenge to the party. But Erdrick's descendants, powered by an ungodly amount of running around in circles to grind, defeats the evil beast, with peace being restored to the land. After returning to Mildenhall, the king says,
"Now is the time for thee to take the throne. Will it be so?"
"Yes, Father, thank you. And for my first order of business, metal detectors will be mandatory in every kingdom." As we can see, the stories in these games are slowly but surely getting there. I could have condensed this even more if I really wanted to, but you can tell that the story actually had some ambition this time around, and I really wanted to honor that. Is it good? No, not really. The characters still have no depth at all. You would think that there would be a little more done with Princess Varia. She watched her father die saving her, got turned into a dog, and vowed to take down Hargon. But after rescuing her from her dog form, just like the rest of the party, she's totally mute. We have the signature Dragon Quest funny moments, which are quickly becoming a part of the series' identity.
Where has everyone gone? Don't stop thinking it's my breath.
But for the first time, I think, having a continuation of a big adventure lead believably into another big adventure was an accomplishment. But if there is one thing that has seen a real leap in quality, it's the music. While I didn't hate any of the music in the original, nothing truly stood out to me. It's tough for me to get down with chiptunes in general, so this wasn't Koichi Sugiyama's fault. It's just not my jam. But a switch must have been flipped in his head when jumping to Dragon Quest II, because immediately when put on the character naming screen, this shit is bouncy. And then we first hear the town themes, and they're in that same vein. If you're not nodding your head to this, you're officially a lizard person in my book. The overworld theme still carries that energy, but with a little more mystery thrown in there. Like, we're adventuring now, but we're still kind of trepidatious. I love how much more cheery and hopeful this all sounds. But more than that, I think I appreciate the melodies. These are tunes that will get stuck in your head for a good reason, and that's to say nothing of the graphical leap from the original to here. It wasn't massive, but it is noticeable. Immediately you'll notice the enemy sprites. The new faces have a decent uptick in detail. A lot of these guys aren't just solid colors and some eyes anymore. Many of them have small details and different colors thrown in as well. Not to mention the amount of these guys that can be seen on screen now. We'll talk about how this affects battles later, but visually this makes the scenes a lot more stimulating to see up to 8 enemies approaching your party. The combinations of enemy encounters are nearly limitless from what I gather, so you never know what kind of teams you'll be up against. It could be these adorable little rats who, when I see them, I just imagine them guarding their cheese hoard that you just walked up on.
Get lost, hey, get lost, find your own cheddar.
The gremlins of Hargon in particular have a lot of detail on them. You can tell that some of the enemy sprites were carried over from the first game, and it starts as early as your first encounter. Listen, I don't hate the slime sprites, but I think it deserved an upgrade. As the series' up-and-coming mascot, this guy should look a little more spiffy, but as you get towards the end game, this is where some really incredible-looking monsters are. We get the iconic Cyclops enemies for the first time. I love this sprite, and the green giant variant just looks right. The bat boons are terrifying. These things look like feral creatures that will rip you limb from limb if you're not careful. And there are even these robot creatures that you can immediately tell were designed by Toriyama. I swear to God, these were those annoying robot enemies that you fought every 5 seconds in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Presentation-wise, there are also plenty of small cinematic moments where scripted events will play out. These don't add a lot, but it's neat to see storytelling integrated into the gameplay. And you even have full control when some of these events are happening. We thought Half-Life 2 was the first to do that, but here's Dragon Quest 2 in 1987. Exploration is also greatly aided by a few new elements, namely the scene transitions when inside structures and buildings. There of course needs to be fades to black when entering a new instance, like a castle, a town, or a dungeon. But when inside these areas, there are darkened corners that when walked into will reveal obscured sections of that area. In towns like castles, this is how they create some depth in buildings. Say, the king's quarters are completely covered, simulating a roof, but when you walk into these sections, that roof is wiped away and the interior is revealed. It's put to great use in dungeons in particular. We thankfully don't need our hero to use TMO5 flash every time we get into a cave. The radiate spell is no longer a thing, so no more wasted MP in caves. Also, no more mindless wandering in caves. It was really tough to create a mental layout in these dark areas in the first game because your view is constantly changing. Not the case in 2. Everything is lit from the beginning to end, but dungeons still keep their edge owed to these dark scene transitions. It's so much easier to remember where you came from and what little darkened chunks you haven't explored. It also helps to teach the player about how secrets can be hidden now. That guard in the bottom of the ruined Moonbrooke Castle, I only thought of that being a possibility because of the rules this mechanic sets up. I saw that there's a staircase in the bottom left of this layout. I can't get to it using these routes, but I can leave the castle through the top left, travel down the side while walking into every tile along the way, and eventually it works and I'm in. I really appreciate this in a gameplay sense, but also in a technical sense. I'm no programmer, but this had to be impressive for NES standards at the time. Maybe it was a baby step, but it seems like magic to me. And speaking of baby steps, we have our old friend the command menu. Thankfully, he's been trimmed down since our last adventure, not a significant amount, but enough to notice. Thank God, when I walk onto a stair tile, I immediately move on to the next floor. No more selecting the stair command. We still have the talk command, which still allows you to progress through the game by getting information from NPCs. Status, just like before, lets you see how large your party's wieners are, and for Varia, her girl wiener. Search is still one of those ones where I think we need another technological leap, if you know what I mean. Treasure chests are still chest tiles, which means you have to walk over them and then use the search command to open the chest. I don't quite get why stairs became automated, but chests are still stuck in the past. I'm still just waiting for the day when the action button becomes the multi-purpose context-sensitive input it's supposed to be. Fingers crossed we'll get there in the next game. Search still has its few uses when exploring. There are scripted quest items in certain spots like the Mirror of Ra hidden in the swamp. This was way easier to swallow though because there are only 4 swamp tiles to search and not the entire 3rd floor of a tower. The spell command brings up any spells that you can use in the overworld like your heals, your heal mores, antidote for curing poison, which is now a status effect in the series. Item allows you to see everyone's items and equipment, and each character has 8 slots to carry around everything. Their weapon of choice takes a slot, their armor takes a slot, accessories like shields or helmets take a slot, plot important items like the silver and gold keys, the giant's flute, charm of Rubus, eye of Malroth, they all take a slot. As you could imagine, this leaves very little room for consumables like the returning medicinal herbs, and new to the series, wyvern wings. Items that let you immediately warp to the last town you rested at. Now, seeing as how these characters have their own 8 slots, there is a workaround. You can go to items like outdated weapons and armor and press the throw command, which will not hurl the items in front of the character to damage enemies sadly, but instead discard the item, freeing up a slot. And using the trade command will allow the party members to pass items amongst themselves as long as there is an empty slot to trade to. It's far more common for you to receive items like weapons and consumables after beating enemies now too. But with this limited inventory, it mostly just amounts to an annoyance. There was never a point in my playthrough where I got a better weapon than I already have as a drop from an enemy, so I had to make detours to the menu just to discard stuff all the time. And as far as I know, there's no way to sell items, so you just have to throw away your equipment. It's kinda sad that after getting Erdrick's legendary sword, it's outclassed by something a merchant sells, thus leaving me no choice but to just throw the thing away. Hey, maybe that's how Gilgamesh had it in Final Fantasy XII. This whole inventory system isn't great by today's standards. It's really cumbersome, and the verbiage of the menu could be more clear. But coming from the previous game, where it was very binary with equipment getting cycled in and out so frequently, I don't hate the added bit of involvement. I like gearing my party up, and this doesn't ask for much. Party members won't even attempt to equip stuff that they aren't able to use. So Artho and Varia, being the mages, won't try to equip broadswords or plate armor, just like how the prince doesn't have any magic points, so you would never give him a wand or light armor. I appreciate the streamlining in this way, but if there's one thing that's anything but simplified, it's combat. Combat is certainly more complicated now owed to the fact that we have 2 new party members to control during battles. The hero is no longer alone. You have to find Artho and Varia first, but you still have the majority of the game ahead of you after recruiting them. All 3 party members can act separately from each other. The Prince of Mildenhall, or the player's character, is your knight class. He learns no magic for the entire adventure, but he will be your heaviest hitter with his physical damage. He's also able to wear the heaviest armor and shields. There really isn't much to him besides hitting like a truck if if you can keep him up to date with the best equipment. Artho is more of an offensive mage by endgame, but he begins with access to the heal spell, which was incredible for grinding if you remember that strat from Dragon Quest 1. Artho can equip some weapons and some armor, but nothing as effective as the stuff the prince can equip. Varia is the dedicated mage. You quickly gain access to heal more with her, and then Infernus, an absolute game changer. It's the first group targeting spell and can reduce enemies of the same type to ash in a single turn. It is extremely helpful. Only thing is, both Artho and Varia can go down pretty easily. The equipment thing started to scare me because I would visit shop after shop trying to find better defenses for Artho and Varia, but anytime I attempted to buy them, I would just get the merchant telling me that they can't equip that. I attempted to give Artho Erdrick's shield at one point, you know, the guy that Artho is also a descendant of, but he still wasn't able. Same exact thing with Erdrick's helmet. It's hilarious to me that the other party members are the other descendants of Erdrick, but the Prince of Mildenhall is the only one who can wield Erdrick's shit. Now, if I were Artho or Varia, I'd be rethinking this whole journey thing. I think DNA tests are in order all around.
In the case of 4-month-old Mariah, Raphael, you are not.
Told you, bro.
Are you serious?
Told you, can I really rock?
But the equipment game doesn't cause too much trouble. It's still a bunch of grinding for money to buy the most expensive gear and then moving on. So maybe it's best that I don't have to do that for 3 characters separately. A lot of Artho and Varia's best equipment can be found throughout the world free of charge. The Thunder Staff is the best magic staff as far as I know, and the Water Flying Cloth is the best defense the princess can get. I also accidentally found the prince's best weapon, the Thunder Sword, and the boost it gives his attack stat?
That's quite big.
This all leads to battles that require some more attention. I mentioned targeting enemy groups with the Infernus spell, but I should explain that. If there is more than one type of enemy in the battle, it will be a part of that group. For spells like Infernus, ones that target entire groups, every enemy unit will take damage unless they dodge it or something. The downside to groups is being unable to choose which specific unit to damage when using physical attacks. The game just chooses one of the enemies in the group to hit. This isn't a huge deal though, because if there's an enemy type that needs to be wiped out, they all need to be targeted, and the prince is the only character who does single target damage worth a poop. Artho and Varia are both throwing out group targeting spells. Eventually, spells like Firebane, which attacks every enemy on the field. We've gone from spamming the attack button with one character to beat most battles, to spamming the attack button with one character alongside choosing the correct spell depending on what the spells you've already learned to beat battles. Infernus for early game group control, Firebane for mid game target all damage, and towards end game, Varia learns Explodette, which also targets every enemy on the field for way more damage than Firebane. That is the end-all be-all spell. There is also the Defeat spell that Artho learns around the same time, which has a lowish chance to erase enemies in a group from the battle, killing them instantly. But this doesn't work on bosses or mini-bosses who you would really need to erase. Other than that, you have your strategy right there. Main character hits with weapon, the 2 mages cast their strongest spell. We don't have any elemental weaknesses yet or any reason to use one spell over another besides basic mana costs. And because there are so many towns in this game, you're always near a town, so mana doesn't become a problem until the end of the game when these dungeons start becoming endurance tests. And that's not because of the cost of the offensive spells. They're relatively cheap, and the mages we have now have far more mana than the protagonists from the first game. The issue is that some of these enemies are masters of smashing your head in. The main party might be pretty tough now, but the enemies got an upgrade as well. They have all kinds of attacks that cut your party down fast. Most enemies still do just attack you, and that makes up a healthy portion of the encounters, but there are some unique monsters that require a unique mindset or strat. The baboons in the beginning of the game don't have anything special, but they can pummel my health into the zeros if I'm not careful. I hated these things, and they were always my first target. These magic flies can use group targeting magic as well, hitting every member of the party, and when a mob of 5 or 6 spawns, it can be dangerous. There are now healing slimes that can restore the health of any enemy that spawns with them. Mudmen are ones that I avoid for grinding sessions if I can. They don't offer much in terms of rewarded experience, and if they dance, they sap away a chunk of your mage's MP. On the flip side, these blizzard enemies in the final area reward a lot of experience, which is great for grinding. But it's dangerous because they also have access to the defeat spell, which can wipe out my entire squad if I'm unlucky. I did get lucky in other ways though. I was thinking that metal slimes were going to be my white whale for this series of videos. Maybe I only take down 1 every game, maybe every 2, but Dragon Quest II's metal slime economy is surprisingly generous. I encountered an 8 stack of metal slimes and was able to down a few of them before the rest ran away. And then I walk a few more steps and find another 8 stack. They must have significantly less defense because the hero is able to deal way more than 1 damage. It wasn't until nearly the end of my run that I discovered the metal babble, creatures that I think will later come to be known as liquid metal slimes. But in this game, these are the real metal slimes. They have way more defense than the regular metal slimes, and if you can manage to beat one, they reward a little over 1,000 experience per, which is a massive payout. But no magic affected the metal enemies, so the strat stayed the same. Just swing at them until they drop. And maybe the reason I encountered so many more metal slimes is because of the bonkers f***ing encounter rate. Let's talk about how you'll be gasping for air with how this game attacks you with enemies. The beginning of Dragon Quest II genuinely seems to be better balanced than the original. There's a larger variety of enemies who aren't pushovers, but they aren't immediate lockouts from exploring further areas, so they offer higher experience if you can overcome them. Plenty of treasure chests in the early dungeons that give you medicinal herbs that basically act as full heals, so you don't have to waste your mana, but then you have to start making those riskier expeditions to new landmarks, and oh my god. I thought the encounter rate in the original game was high. Little did I know, I have essentially been playing in the kiddie pool as far as being stopped every 3 steps goes. These enemies want to gnaw off your legs, and as soon as you're on death's doormat, limping back to a city to rest up, maybe to save your life, the game will continue to bombard you with encounter after encounter, and your funds will not only be spent on staying at inns to recover your health, but we begin another Dragon Quest tradition here. If one of your party members has died, you have to take them to a priest or a house of healing to revive them for a hefty price. This makes sense. I mean, the world of Dragon Quest II is literally telling me to go f myself. It is all gas, no brakes with those tough enemy spawns I was telling you about. They have so many attacks that will drain your party before you realize what even hit you. Heaven forbid you have a string of 5 steps where you run into encounters every single step along the way. You better hope that fate is smiling on you so you can run away without taking any pot shots. Let's hope that the encounters never get this frequent again, because this quickly became insufferable. Keeping with tradition, the only battle that required a strategy that differed from all the others was the final fight with Hargon and then Malroth. Artho continued to use his spell Increase, and Varia casted Defense as much as possible. Okay, viewer, I want you to think about what you think these spells will do when casted. Now, if you said Defense will lower the defense of the targeted enemy and increases the defense stat of your party members, no you didn't, I hate you. Besides trial and error, you wouldn't know what those 2 spells do. Hell, you wouldn't know what any of the items or spells do. Let's assume I lived back in the psychedelic 80s and didn't have access to the internet, so I can't learn the functions of these items and spells. What would I have done? And while you might be saying just use them, that's boring, I would actually say this is where the manual for Dragon Quest II comes in, with it having details on what things in this game are and what they do. Thanks to the manual, I was able to learn about every spell in the game before my characters even learned them, so spoilers I guess. I also learned that the parry option in battles is not going to lead to a satisfying counterattack, it's just an incredibly misleading name for block. It's because of the manual that I learned what items like these Dragon's Bane that every character can buy and equip do. The manual says that a Dragon's Bane will... well, the other items are right here. Okay, this is what I get for trying to play a broken, unfinished game on its own terms. Manual tangent aside, that is the strat I used to beat the last 2 fights. Just constantly buffing us, debuffing them, and healing anytime someone took a hit. The prince and his freight train level attacks was the only source of damage, and it was enough to take them down. That's not what made the last area a pain in my ass though. Let's discuss the final gauntlet of Roan. After traversing a maze of a dungeon full of collapsing floors that would have broken me if I wasn't using save states, repeating hallways that loop around if you don't choose the right path, all while fighting the toughest enemies in the game up until this point at a frequency previously thought impossible, the party emerges onto a surprisingly captivating snowy landscape. There is a bone thrown your way with this little shrine. The old man in here will not only heal you, even reviving dead party members free of charge, but he can do this as many times as you need. It's obvious that this place was made for you to grind, so I did, up until the prince was level 25. I then made my way up to Hargon's castle, trying to avoid the random encounters as we go, but fighting the ones I think I can spare. But I get to the castle across the mountain and break the illusion, now in Hargon's real castle. I cast Step Guard to walk across the damaging tiles, but Step Guard only lasts for like 5 steps, so I have to cast it a solid 4 times, eating into my MP. Then I make my way up the tower and get my ass kicked by Atlas, the first of Hargon's mini-bosses. I'm already low on mana and health, and save states aren't saving me now. I leave the castle and re-enter it so I'll have that inn that I can rest at, restoring my party. Come to find out, not only is Hargon's castle a stupidly hard endurance test, but it's also bugged. If you heal your party, then walk outside, you're put back to the state you were in before you entered the fake castle. You might be thinking, okay, well I can just enter the castle again and fight the monsters in there. But no, that's bug 2. You can't leave the illusory castle at all without having your condition revert. Learning this information, I say f it and go back to the old man to grind more. I get the prince to level 30, and if I wasn't able to speed through this grinding, I would have gone insane. Emulation is the only thing saving this video right now, but I go back determined to clear this tower. I'm able to beat all of Hargon's mini-bosses with each of them draining my resources more than the last. And I did it, but I was in no shape to take on the final fight. I gritted my teeth and was going to rethink my strategy. If I'm going to beat these fights and Hargon in one go, I need to skip literally every single random encounter. On my way back to the castle, I entered the Matrix. I was saving my state every stretch of land I walked. That way, if the game hands me an encounter where the enemies get first strike or something, I can just rewind time and do it over. Oh yeah, I'm embracing the cheating big time now. I make it up to the trigger for the first mini-boss and... what? I walked past it. And then the second? The mini-bosses didn't respawn, but Atlas did earlier when I beat him. Who knows? This game is already a mystery. But after that, I took down the bosses and finally wiped my hands clean of this game. What a train wreck. Well, not even. I totally see where the team ran out of time. With the gauntlet of fights and the band-aid solution of the old man who can heal you, the illusory castle is neat, but it obviously wasn't finished. And the need for the step guard spell on these damaging tiles sapping away your mana for buffing and healing just makes Hargon's castle frustrating and time-consuming to trudge through. But I want to stress that the entire game wasn't as busted. I can't sing the early game's praises enough. That first stretch of game where you're assembling the party and battling monsters was nearly perfect. The balance and progression were great, but then things start to show their cracks when getting the ship and the entire map becomes available at once. Again, it was too much at one time. I say with the utmost confidence, you can skip Dragon Quest II for the NES. But what about one of the remakes? The prevailing sentiment I gather online is that the Super Nintendo remake for Dragon Quest II included in the Dragon Quest 1+2 release is the best version of the game at the moment. I'm sure that will change in a few months, as I mentioned last time. The HD versions will definitely be the better versions when they drop. Maybe I'll even make a video on the collection in a few years when I finish this retrospective. But the only problem is the SNES version only released in Japan at the end of 1993, which is why I chose to look at a fan translation. Keep the theme of looking at fan projects for these two videos, you know? To temper expectations a bit here, this didn't feel as substantial as going from an NES game to a fan remake made decades after the fact. Jumping from the NES to the SNES is very noticeable, but this still feels like Dragon Quest II through and through. Visually, the game is leaps and bounds above the original. Even this obscene gesture looks 8 bits more colorful. It shows a great progression for the spells that I'm excited to see more and more of as we progress. We have Infernus and its little whirlpool thingy, whatever this is. Then Firebane engulfs the entire screen, ending with Explodette completely nuking the screen. The towers even use some parallax scrolling when on the upper floors to simulate height. It looks especially great on the climb up Hargon's tower. The items that can be found in the overworld are now given dedicated sprites instead of just being hidden in chests. This makes finding those important items way more exciting. This also helps with making those cryptic item placements less annoying. And that's not just me saying that either. There have been a couple of improvements to make the journey a little more, not horse. A big help that honestly felt broken were the prayer rings scattered throughout the game. I found the first one in a tower and it basically gave me unlimited MP. A character will use it as a consumable, putting it on and then instantly refilling their MP. The caveat is that they're supposed to break, but mine only did that one time during a grinding session that I didn't record. For the rest of the game, I ran around with multiple prayer rings for the chance that one might break, but they never did. It was overkill, but Artho and Varia traded them back and forth, meaning I didn't have to rest at ends if I took the time to refill my mana and get everyone back into fighting shape through magic alone, all the way up until the last moments of the game. I'm not complaining, don't get me wrong, it's just very odd that this is so easy to get. There is now an NPC in Tantagel who tells me that the Dew's yarn is specifically on the 3rd floor of that tower. It still doesn't say specifically where it is, but you know, hey, I'll give credit where it's due. Fastfinger's cell has a tile indicating some tomfoolery next to where he escaped, so I'd say that's an improvement as well. You can find a world map in the Dragon Lord's castle, and this was an incredible addition, allowing me to see small islands on the map. And while I only had the idea to head over there when I did based on the knowledge I picked up on my last playthrough, the map will definitely make it slightly less cumbersome for newcomers. Only slightly though. Playing through these remakes, it's cool to see the game I just finished in a different light, yeah, but I think the coolest aspect is getting a glimpse at features and mechanics that will be introduced in the series further down the line. Things like the items that permanently boost your stats. I personally didn't notice too much of a difference from giving Artho a lot of HP seeds so he gets more health than he had in the NES game, but being given the opportunity at all to break your party out of the guidelines they're built into is a plus. Like, is giving the Prince strength seeds going to make him hit harder? Sure, but you won't break these guys out of their dedicated roles and give them new utility. Artho is still always going to be the better option for curing poison, because hell no, I'm not paying a church 16 gold per person. I can even stroll down the road to this mom and pop store who sells antidotes for half that price. Again, I'm not touching it, just pointing it out. To reiterate, this remake is less substantial than the remake we looked at last time. Dragon Quest 1+2 for the SNES is obviously a better game with better quality visuals, more clarity in its NPC and overworld hints, even though credit should go to Spiff and the translation team for that one. Good job, fellas. The music was, well, actually, I don't think the SNES sound chip does these tunes as much justice. I don't know, something seems like it's missing, but everything else just felt remarkably similar. I still got all the same equipment the same way, I still grinded for hours and hours. I got most of that done in my spare time, so it wasn't as arduous. But I'm still not a fan of the constant need to increase my levels just to progress with the game. Balance will become less of an issue as we move on, but the burning question right now is how soon are we talking? Because one of the big ones is up next, and I don't want to be the contrarian who complains about it being a grind as well. I even beat the final boss the same way here too. He was certainly a bit more tanky than he was in the original, but I managed all the same. Besides a small episode when resting at the inn in Burnan, where Artho, or Kuki in this game, falls ill with a curse and has to stay at the inn. I bet this would have been pretty rough if I hadn't already collected a leaf of the world tree. These were in the NES game too, but they were just one-use revives. But in the Super Nintendo version, for this one event, a man in town will tell you that a leaf of the world tree will fix Artho's condition. This was barely a speed bump in the playthrough, but I do appreciate the attempt at adding some stakes by making Hargon directly impede the player. There is no extra or additional content that I know of for this version, so that's it. I did make one pit stop before closing the game out, however. I forgot that the Dragon Lord's grandson said he had some advice for me if I can beat Hargon, so why not go see what he has to say?
Oh, Ross, you have arrived. I'm very pleased. Aside from the old matters, we have become good friends. From now on, I'll call you Ross, and you can call me Ryu.
Yeah, sure, buddy. Good friends. Maybe we'll meet again. But yeah, I think that does it for Dragon Quest II. What a shame that it was so close to being something special. Towards the beginning, it really felt like it was working towards a dramatic evolution of what the first game laid out. And it did do that for the most part, but the time crunch the team faced shot all of that in the foot. If it wasn't the Batman-level detective skills you need to make basic progression, it's the need to grind and reach a certain level just to be able to comfortably explore every new area you come across. And the final area just doesn't have a comfortable level. Even in the remake, I skipped every random encounter using the save states when making the journey up to Hargon's castle again. That naive optimism wasn't totally misplaced. I enjoyed most of my time with Dragon Quest II. It just has plenty of rough patches that keep it from being something that I would recommend to anyone. If you don't have a walkthrough on standby and are super curious, just don't bother. But alright, I've got a couple of individual videos I'm wanting to get out before I continue this series, but it shouldn't be as long of a wait, because after all that, it's time to conclude this saga. But before signing off, I would like to bring to attention my $5 personal account patron, Squirrel. Thank you, my guy. And of course, I can't forget my $10 administrator account patrons, White Ghost 117 and Nikki Coon 99. I love you fellas so much. Next time on the Dragon Quest Retrospective, we jump back in time. We meet the man responsible for starting the Erdrick bloodline. I'll see you all next time when I experience the legendary Dragon Quest III.